And so things like that have just rubbed everyone in this district terribly wrong. And we're all ready for change. And the other thing to add too, Phil, is Dan barely won his last primary. And that speaks volumes of what the people feel like. He won 59%. And there's a guy named Jameson Ellis that got 41%. Jameson was from Montgomery County, a small business owner. I don't know him personally, but from what I've been told, he didn't really build a campaign. He bootstrapped it. He didn't raise much money. He raised like $30,000, wrapped his truck, and was like, I'm not a warmonger. I'm not a globalist. Like, vote for me, not Dan Crenshaw. And he pulled 41% of the votes.
That's incredible. And I understand you have raised a little bit of money. I understand you've been successful in that regard, and that's a big part of it. So congratulations to you in that regard. Welcome to episode 84 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silberman Law Firm, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is August 21st, 2025. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host, and I'm joined by Chris Heald, who is my supervising attorney and co-host for the firm. Chris, do you have a pet peeve, biggest pet peeve about practicing law?
I don't know. I don't think there's any part of the practice of law that I don't just thoroughly enjoy, Phil. It is all just a blessing to be here, and I don't take any of that for granted.
Do you remember in the firm's early history, and I was not a big fan of fancy paper to send demand letters out on, and you wanted the really fancy paper, and you said that when opposing counsel or the opponent receives our demand letter, they should tremble in terror from the quality of the paper we use in our demand letters. Are you still of that mind, or are you okay with kind of the flimsy computer paper?
I believe you're overstating my position only slightly. It's not that the quality makes it, it's that the lack of quality brings down your credibility. We're in a digital age now. Everything's sent electronically anyway. I do submit to you and stand by that in 2013, life was a little bit different, and it was still more common to send physical letters on actual letterhead so as to bring credibility to your firm, which I thought was important given our firm had just begun. Everything for the brand, Phil.
We just ordered a bunch of business cards for attorneys. I'm not sure they're going to be the American Psycho quality that we aspire to. I believe we ordered them through Canvas Printer, whoever that may be. I'm very excited to see the quality of these business cards that we're going to get back. We haven't used business cards in quite some time, but we'll see how that goes.
I'm just excited everybody wants business cards.
Very happy about that. All right. What's on our docket today? We've got an update on the 10 Commandments. Not that the Lord has changed them, but rather the state of Texas, a judge in the state of Texas has struck down a law requiring them to be displayed in Texas public schools. And then we'll be moving on to our legal questions section, where Chris is going to educate us on contesting wills based on dementia and incapacity. And then finally, no rant and rave section, something better. We've got an interview with a friend of mine, Jon Bonck, who's running for US Congress. So we'll be talking to him a little bit about that and some of his positions. So let's get it kicked off with our legal news section. And first thing we're talking about is the 10 Commandments in Texas schools have been struck down. Again, that's not the 10 Commandments themselves. Those are still standing. But rather a federal judge out of San Antonio has said it is unconstitutional to require public schools to display them, even though they've been donated by good God-fearing people. Chris, are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not surprised. It's a federal judge. You can pick which forum you go to. You find the judge you like. I'm sure they filed in every district. You pick the judge you like, you get the ruling you like. It's exactly what we talked about last week. It's Republicans making a show of it and Democrats making arguments against it. Everybody pandering to their base, wasting a bunch of taxpayer money. Yay for us.
Here's a note. The Fifth Circuit already blocked almost an identical law in Arkansas. I think that was earlier this month. And there was another Louisiana law, a very similar Ten Commandment law that was also blocked. So not surprising. The children will not have the Ten Commandments posted in their schools, I don't believe. But here's the most surprising thing to me. One of the plaintiffs that did not want the Ten Commandments in the schools was Rabbi Mara Nathan from Temple Bethel. She was one of the plaintiffs, female rabbi. They have those nowadays, Chris. I don't know if you knew that. She's from a temple in the San Antonio area. She did not want the Ten Commandments displayed in schools. I'm not sure I understand why. Maybe she's sympathetic to Muslim neighbors, but I would think a rabbi would want the Ten Commandments in school. So that stuck out to me. U.S. District Court Judge Fred, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Byrie, I think, he made the ruling. And here's his quote, Chris. I think he took 55 pages, and here was one of the quotes from the 55 pages. Even though the Ten Commandments would not be affirmatively taught, the captive audience of students likely would have questions which teachers would feel compelled to answer. That is what they do. So he wrote that, and then he quoted the First Amendment, and then he ended his opinion with amen. A little bit of poking fun at the Ten Commandments, I believe. And no surprise, Chris, he was appointed by Bill Clinton. But
I think we got into that a little last week too, though. Okay, so it can be there, but we mustn't speak of it. Like, what are we doing? What is the point of? You must display them, but you mustn't mention them ever. So you're just doing it to invite controversy. Who are we helping with this? I try to consider the other side, right? We got a lot of expats that live in the Middle East, right? Oil and gas people that go over there for work. If your kids are attending school there, I wonder how they would feel. Would they want, and I don't know how schools are there either. Maybe I'm just completely ignorant, but would you want them being indoctrinated with Muslim faith? Or would you rather just say, hey, I completely respect it's a Muslim country. You guys absolutely are the majority. We come from a Christian country. We're a Christian family. When we go to school, let's just learn math and science. We don't need the Quran or the Bible being taught to anybody.
Okay. Fair point. You know how I feel about it. I'm fine with the Ten Commandments being in school. I think there are some very important values in the Ten Commandments, but I think this is a battle that has been lost several times now. So I don't see this going well. I will point out that Bill Clinton, who appointed the federal court judge that struck this down, Bill Clinton, I believe, was a professed Southern Baptist, but that may be in profession only, knowing the history of Bill Clinton.
Yeah, I think.
So let's go ahead and move on to
our. As well.
The Catholics aren't claiming Joe Biden anymore, huh? I don't know.
I mean, wasn't he in support of abortion? A lot of people claim to be of a certain religion. I think as a politician, almost all of them claim to be a member of some religion.
Yeah, no, that's right. Good point. All right, that brings us to our legal question section. And here's the question. Can you contest a will based on someone having dementia? Chris, I don't think you need the law, but let me give the listeners the law real quick, and then we'll get your thoughts. A testator has capacity when that testator has sufficient mental ability. That's a quote from a case. I don't think I have the case. They have to understand the process of creating the will. So in other words, the capacity exists when the testator is of sound mind. In Texas specifically, where we are, the testator has capacity when he or she has the mental ability to understand the following. And the case is outlined, I think, 5 points here. The testator has to understand they're making a will. They have to understand the effect of the will, right? What the will is going to do, the general nature and extent of the testator's property, the natural objects of the testator's property, so the testator's relatives and things like that, and then the elements of the disposition of assets, along with sufficient memory to make reasonable judgments and plans about those assets. So that's the law in a nutshell. Chris, tell us generally about the will contest process as it pertains to capacity. If you've got a client that wants to do this, what are some of the things you ask the client?
I would say first and foremost, I ask if there's any medical evidence, if they were formally diagnosed with a condition. Just because you're not formally diagnosed doesn't mean you don't have conditions by any means. But that's what I want to know first. What does her doctor say? What does his doctor say? Do they have Alzheimer's? Do they have dementia? Was it early stage dementia? Was it late stage? What kind of problems did they have? And then after the medical diagnosis, going into the real world stuff. Okay. Were they able to remember who was who? Did they know how to drive and how to get from one place to another? Did they forget how to pay their bills? Really trying to get an idea of what this person's life was at the time that they executed this will. Getting an idea of what their condition was, because you can have people with dementia and just a dementia diagnosis isn't an automatic win for the contestant. Testator had dementia, it's over. If they've got two witnesses and a notary and a nurse and a doctor and a rabbi in the room that say, no, despite the dementia diagnosis, I watched them sign this will. At the time they signed this will, the person was lucid and they knew everything and they absolutely knew what they were signing. Maybe later on in the afternoon, they may sunset and they may not have had the same level of capacity they had that very same day. But it really is all those elements you listed at the time they signed the will.
Okay. Mechanically, so once you've got that information from the client and you're convinced that, okay, this is a good will contest based on capacity, mechanically, what do you file? There's a probate already open, let's say, and they've deposited the will with the county clerk, and there's an application to have the will probated. What is it that you as the plaintiff file, and what does that look like?
Hopefully you catch it before the will has been admitted to probate. If the will not been admitted to probate, or even if it has, it's still the same document. You're still filing a contest to the will. Under the estates code allows you to contest a will, but you want to do it before because, as you were pointing out, the elements of proving up a will are on the applicant. So if you contest the will before it's admitted to probate, the applicant bears the burden of proving up the will. If you're after the will has already been admitted to probate, one, you have a 2-year statute of limitations, and two, now you have the burden. It's less significant. It's a minor burden shift, but in the law, burdens are burdens. I'd rather not have it than.
Yeah. Always better to be unburdened than burdened, what I say. But Chris's point, just to clear that up a little bit, if you're not familiar with the way trials go, technically the person who has the burden is supposed to be doing a lot more work, and during Chris's closing arguments, if he's defending the will, for example, and let's say the will's been admitted and the plaintiff has the burden, Chris said, now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, they've got the burden. So you hear that. But practically what Chris is saying is you're in the courthouse, downtown somewhere, most likely. The jurors are hearing sort of and they're just deciding whether the will's valid. And Chris, you would agree the element of the burden shifting and all that probably gets lost on the jury.
Yeah, it's minimal. They're just going to go in there and they're going to try to say, is this person's will or no?
Yeah. Okay. So let's say you have the thing filed. Let's just fast forward to witnesses. What kind of fact witnesses do you anticipate calling or cross-examining in these types of cases?
Like we were talking about, doctors, nurses, family members, anyone that can speak to just the ins and outs and daily life of the testator. Doctors can talk about the diagnosis and give you the medical perspective, but it's unlikely they were there for the signing of the will. So for that, you go to the witnesses to the will or anyone else who was around on that day. A lot of times we get the call from the family member that says, I wasn't there, but I got there that afternoon and they told me about what happened that morning. And my brother came with his sister-in-law, who's a notary, and two of his friends, and had dad sign the will. And so they're going to testify to that because they heard about what happened. They know what happened, and they're going to say, hey, this was how it went down. If you have anyone in the room, obviously they're a great witness, but a lot of times it's circumstantial evidence and family members that say, hey, I talked to him the day before he didn't know who he was and where he was. And then I talked to him the day after and he didn't know who he was and where he was. So it's a good chance that the day he signed, he didn't know who he was and where he was.
Yeah. Do you think, this is one thing, do you think it's a good idea to have an expert designated as far as maybe a doctor does a doctor need to opine that, okay, the person maybe was diagnosed with dementia, but based on the medical records he reviews, that they could have moments of lucidity? Do you think that's necessary to have a doctor expert, or are there any other experts you might want?
If I'm defending the will, yeah, I definitely want that, because a lot of
Mm.
are going to see dementia diagnosis and that's game over. But like I was saying earlier, it's not supposed to be. That's not supposed to be the end of the analysis. So yes, I would want a doctor up there to say that, not just me, but someone with a white lab coat that's going to say, hey, yes, they were diagnosed with dementia, but it was early stage. I examined them. I treated them periodically. There's definitely days that they could have been lucid. I wasn't with them on that exact day, but it's certainly possible that on that day they were lucid. And then you elicit the fact testimony from the other people.
Okay.
Um,
There you go. All right. That's a will contest capacity case in a nutshell when someone might have dementia. Hopefully that's helpful if you get one of those cases. Now, normally with Chris, right at this time, we'd go into my favorite part of the show, which is the rant and rave section. We are not doing that today. Instead, we're going to have a friend of mine on the show by the name of Jonathan Bonck. So let's go ahead and welcome John to the show. Jon Bonck. He's running for the US Congress. I think that's Texas 2, District 2 in the Houston area. So let's go ahead and bring John on. John, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, my friend?
Thanks, Phil. I'm excited. Glad to be here, brother.
All right. So, look, we've known each other a little while, but tell the listeners a little bit about you. Like, where are you from? Family, day job?
Absolutely. I grew up in South Louisiana, a real small rural farming community. I was actually raised by my grandparents. And in Louisiana, we got the big flagship of LSU. I went there, had a great opportunity to learn and grow, and graduated in 2009, which was the great financial crisis. And I actually worked a minimum wage job for a year because I couldn't find a
Oh,
job. Did it faithfully, and then the opportunity opened up for me to move to Houston. So I packed up everything I had and made my way here.
wow, that was a rough time to graduate. A lot of millennials that graduated at that time, a bunch of data on just how long it took to really start life graduating after the great financial recession. What town did you grow up in Louisiana?
Raising Cajun. I grew up in Eunice, Louisiana. It's a
Huh?
small crawfishing farms, rice fields, that kind of hard work. So that's where I was at every summer, is working in those fields.
Okay. I want you to claim that town in case hopefully you get elected, and I want the people from Eunice to know, hey, that you're the homegrown guy. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to run, because I got to know you just playing a little tennis with you, and I know you're a mortgage banker or broker by trade. You're in the mortgage business. And then all of a sudden I got an email or something my wife sent me, said, hey, your friend's running for Congress. So how did that decision come about?
Absolutely. I moved here to Houston, was in oil and gas for a little bit, went through that 2014 downturn, and my wife and I were getting married, and we were like, we need to move out of oil and gas. So we moved into real estate. But during that time, I got to see a presidential election. If you remember, Senator Cruz ran for president, and we were really close and kind of part of that campaign. We had some family that were on the team, and I was just inspired to see, hey, here's what it takes to make an impact in that country. And over the 10 years, I've had a lot of friendships in the political space privately. And my wife and I have got to help these folks buy homes and get mortgages. And they've become friends of ours. And they've always nudged me like, we need business people in
Mm.
politics. I think everyone is over the career politicians. And I was like, we're raising our first baby. And oh, we had our second baby. And I'm building a mortgage business with my business partner. Like, this just isn't a good time for me. And then COVID hit and the 2020 election and the border just opening up wide. And you look at Congressman Crenshaw, and I feel like the way he's voted is so unrepresentative of who we are in the district. Like, we're true conservatives in this district, evangelical, Ted Cruz, MAGA red, Trump conservatives. And as Dan's worried about sending hundreds of billions to Ukraine because their border is being invaded, I'm like, what about our border? And we had
Well,
drugs being trafficked and illegals and children, and I just feel like he's so out of touch with what the base wants in the district.
tell us a little bit about the district. Describe the district, the geographic location for the listeners.
Absolutely. We're in Greater Houston, and there's a lot of congressional districts that touch this area. But Congressional District 2 touches Harris County about 50% and touches Montgomery County about 50%. And in Texas, we have 38 congressional districts, and they all have about 700 to 800,000 people. And so CD2 or Congressional District 2 kind of starts in Houston, hits a lot of the Jersey Village area, goes up to the Spring area, Humble, Kingwood, Atascocita. Then it swings up to the Woodlands in Montgomery County and hits a little bit of East Montgomery County as well. So it's a really unique district. And when you look at the demographics, it is very Republican. It is a stronghold for the Republican base. It's a R+30 type district, and it's a very conservative district. Montgomery County, the reddest district in Texas, if you look at the presidential election. And so the people in Montgomery County, and especially the people in Harris County, want real conservative representation. And the moment that we're going through as a country, and you see what President Trump's doing, he's doing everything he promised he would do. He's delivering. He's shutting down US aid. He's bringing education back to the states. We got Texas school choice passed, but the big, beautiful bill also had school choice that got passed federally. So he's doing a lot of things to empower families, empower parents, empower the individual, and not grow big government like we've all been used to. And so that's what conservatives are looking for right now. Somebody that is pro-limited government, pro-family, pro-faith, pro-freedom. And that's just not what we have right now in the current congressman.
And mentioning Dan Crenshaw, he's the incumbent, and you've got your work cut out for you. He's a well-known guy, and I'll just tell the listeners, and I don't know if it's politically correct to say this or not, but he's the guy with the eye patch, okay? And that's how people know him. That's Dan Crenshaw. And you mentioned one thing about him being a proponent of funding Ukraine. What else or what specifically is he doing that you don't like, that you're going to change, and what would you do better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you hear about Congressman Crenshaw and what the district feels about him is that he's not present. I talked to the folks in Montgomery County. I'm on the campaign trail, and they're like, he hasn't been here for years. And as a congressman, you need to be embedded in the community. You need to be with people in the district. Like, how are your family doing? How's your business doing? What issues are you having? Like, really being there. And he's not doing that. And when it comes to the work in DC, he's missed 11% of the votes. And so Dan's not showing up to work. And that percent might not mean much to your listeners, but most people in Congress will miss about 2% of votes in a legislative session. You have emergencies, you have family issues that arise, sicknesses and things like that, but missing 5 times more work. If that happens in our business, you have a
Yeah.
colleague miss 5 times more work, you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
And to me, the border was such a big issue. You saw the people turn out for President Trump. The border being unsecured was such a catastrophic event for us to go through. And the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, was on a vote for impeachment. Dan didn't even show up to vote for it. And as being in the district, you're like, well, we were so mad about what's happening with the border under President Biden. Here we are trying to impeach Mayorkas, and you don't even show up to vote. And so things like that have just rubbed everyone in this district terribly wrong. And we're all ready for change. And the other thing to add too, Phil, is Dan barely won his last primary. And that speaks volumes of what the people feel like. He won 59%, and there's a guy named Jameson Ellis that got 41%. Jameson was from Montgomery County, a small business owner. I don't know him personally, but from what I've been told, he didn't really build a campaign. He bootstrapped it. He didn't raise much money. He raised like $30,000, wrapped his truck, and was like, I'm not a warmonger. I'm not a globalist. Like, vote for me, not Dan Crenshaw. And he pulled 41% of the votes.
That's incredible. And I understand you have raised a little bit of money. I understand you've been successful in that regard, and that's a big part of it. So congratulations to you in that regard. Yeah. So it's like that old adage, showing up is 90% of the battle. So if you get elected right here on the weekly docket, Mr. Bonck, you're committing to the voters. You're going to show up and vote, right?
Absolutely. It's public service. It's sacrifice. So you're sacrificing to be away from your business, your family, your friends, and being in DC and fighting for the issues that your district cares about.
All right. Good stuff. Let's talk a little bit about something that's close to home for you, you being a guy and your wife being a realtor. And then also I'm in a real estate business as well. Let's talk about housing affordability. And I've got some statistics here for you. Okay. We're talking about 75% of US households cannot afford a median price home in 2025. And that median price nationally wide is about $460,000. And then additionally, home sales transactions, lowest level in 30 years. That statistic is from the National Association of Home Builders. And in Houston, it's a little bit better. 60% of the households in Houston cannot afford a median home price around 350K in Houston. So a little bit better in Houston, but it's still a problem. What ideas do you have? What do you think about that? Where do you see this housing affordability thing going and getting fixed? Because that's really big on voters' minds right now.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, Phil. It's a core issue of mine. It's a core issue of the country. And people have to realize that housing is important to our society and it's important to our economy. A home does two powerful things. It provides stability and security for a family, and it also creates a path for that family to build real wealth in our country. And so we have to have a housing market that works for every generation. And right now, if you're a younger millennial or Gen Z and Gen Alpha's about to graduate high school, these folks don't really have a pathway to purchase real estate right now. I'm on the phone with clients that are getting married and they're in their 20s and they're renting for 1,500 and they're like, I want to buy a $400,000 house, which is close to the median priced home. And that payment with taxes and insurance and mortgage insurance and higher rates, it's $3,500. And they're like, how can I handle
Mhm.
$2,000 more of a housing expense? But I think there's some solutions. And the biggest thing I think is you look at international buyers. Last year we had 56 billion of single family real estate that was sold in our country. And the number one source of international buyers was China and number
Mhm.
two was Canada. So I'm all about free market capitalism, but I'm like, why are we allowing foreign nationals to access our single family housing market when there's Americans and American families living from here, working here, and they're being priced out of the market? And so maybe we put a moratorium for 10 years on international buyers. You've heard of President Trump talk about mass deportations. All these illegals that are here, they have to be somewhere. And we have all the illegals that are accessing housing. And then I think just irresponsible fiscal policy has caused rates to stay higher. You've seen that we have
Mhm.
37 trillion in debt as a country. We have a deficit, which means we're spending more than we're taking in the IRS. And the credit rating for our country has been degraded some. And so the international markets need to invest their money in US bonds. And if they do that, then that will actually move rates down. A lot of people are waiting for the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell to cut rates. The 30-year mortgage is based off the US 10-year Treasury yield. And so we need people to buy US bonds. And so if we can get to fiscal responsibility, then people will want to invest in US bonds. And then the last thing I think about housing affordability and how to fix it, the same thing with international buyers. You have companies like BlackRock, huge private equity groups that are just buying entire master plan developments and buying them and then putting them for sale or for lease. And
Mhm.
so I'm a free market capitalist, but again, prices have run away so much from the American people that maybe we need to put a moratorium for private equity groups like BlackRock not to buy up all these homes and let the wage growth and let prices cool down so that we can close that gap.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And this being a legal show, we've done a lot of coverage on some of these proposed bills on limiting foreign investment. That's been floated about for a long time. And then, of course, your points on the bond market is excellent. I think a lot of people lose sight of the 10-year being a big factor. It's not all about what Jerome Powell's doing in Jackson Hole right now. It's
Yeah.
really,
Well, do you remember, Phil, they cut twice going into
Mhm.
the election, and it was 250 basis points cut. So they cut the
Mhm.
federal funds rate by 100 basis points. You remember what happened to US 10-year Treasury yield after that?
Nothing,
It
right?
it went up 100 basis points. So we had
Yeah,
clients like, the Fed cut the rates.
that's
Like,
right.
why is my interest rate going higher for people that were looking to buy and checking
Yeah,
in how our rate's doing? It's like, they actually went up, and
yeah,
people are so perplexed. And
yeah.
they just don't understand how the 30-year mortgage product follows the bond market, not the Fed.
Yeah, that's a good point. Wonderful, Mr. Bonk. Thank you for coming on the show. Any final thoughts you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, I just want people to know my core values at the end of the day are faith and family and freedom. And that's what my campaign's all about. That's what I'm all about. And that's what I'm going to bring to this district once I'm in office. And
Well,
yeah, and
very,
if you want Yeah, I was going to say, if you want to follow along, you can go to jonbonck.com, BONCK, and learn more about me. And I'm glad to have you follow along.
All right, great. We'll try to throw that website up in the comments section when these get posted on the social medias. All right, everybody certainly appreciates Mr. Bonck coming on the show and sharing some of his views and his solutions and ideas on some proposed bills should he get elected. And thank you for coming on the show, Jon.
Glad to be here, man. Thanks, Phil. God bless you.
That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silverman. Chris has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silbalawfirm.com. Tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great rest of your week and weekend.